Indigenous Peoples Day. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Carmen Llanes Pulido, who will start us off with a land acknowledgement.
Good evening, everyone. Happy celebration of 500 plus years of dignity, identity, and resistance. I'm extremely honored and humbled to have been asked to do a little bit of a grounding for us as a modern Chicana Indigenous woman on this continent, with great humility and with permission from my elders and from those who have helped me pick up this red path. I am here to share a little bit with you all, with all respect, about my personal journey and what I've been taught, what has been given to me in recognizing this time and in grounding ourselves, what it means to connect with our earth culture roots and to be Indigenous people in the modern world. I am not here to be any kind of expert, only to share with you what's been passed down to me from my elders and from the exchange of other Native people. And I recognize that I am a person of mixed heritage, of many cultures, like many of you on this call. In offering this, I certainly don't mean to convey that this is the way of any one group, but I'll share with you who I am, what I bring, and then I'll invite you all to share with me in a centering and somewhere between a short meditation and a prayer, an invocation. This is part of our modern adapting, and I'll tell you that some of you have seen me do this work with my dad, call in the directions or center a space before we begin something. And we have been asked to do this over Zoom multiple times. And I'll let you in on a little, what I've noticed to be a trend of Native people is a lot of times if you want something, you have to ask for it 3 times. So the first couple of times, we've been pretty hesitant to indulge because we're not sure how to do it the right way. And we want to honor what we know and what we respect. And so it's hard to do that virtually. With that said, just like we find ourselves in modern capitalist society, we wear colorful mantas with our blue jeans, and we practice the culture in the way that we know how in the context that we're given. And those things do exist, they coexist together, they have coexisted and they continue to. So my upbringing is here in Austin, Texas, and I was attuned to the land that I'm living on, because even if on a piece of paper somebody owns a piece of property, we actually understand that we belong more to this land than the land belongs to us, in the sense that this is where we live, right? So I grew up on the Colorado River on this Balcones escarpment, where I was, I guess what Catholics would call baptized in the waters of the Colorado River, and having a very close relationship to the animals and plants around me in that space, and knowing that that was part of my heritage and my upbringing. Like many modern day Chicanas, I identify as Chicana in the political sense, in that being Mexican American, I recognize a duality on multiple levels in our culture, but also the fact that that our people have been here for a very long time and have been forced into a box that only identifies the European roots of our ethnicity, of our race, of our culture, more importantly, of our humanity. And like many Chicanos, we are a detribalized people in many senses of the word. So we have been forced away from a designation or a tribal connection, but it's important for people to understand and to know that in 1992, which commemorated 500 years of the coming of Columbus, that the 5 tribes of Texas officially recognized Chicanos and Mexican Americans as Native people in this continent. In addition to that, as my family has leaned more into our history here, we come from northern Mexico all the way up to this area. And our people come from the families and the bands of who are sort of grouped as the Coahuilteca. And the Coahuilteca extend from northern Mexico all the way through the Balcones Escarpment into San Antonio, where a lot of my family is from. So, so we have been on a path of learning more teachings from our people and understanding that actually our people, their cultures and their languages and their presence in this part of what some call Anahuac, this particular part of Central Texas, predates even the migration of the Mexica people or the Aztecs from Aztlan into central Mexico. Of course, there's been a lot of exchange during that time, and there continues to be exchange. So what I'm calling in with you all is getting my charcoal burnt here. I'll share a little bit more, and then I'm going to just take you through what I'm doing right now to honor my ancestors and to do my generational healing, not only for myself spiritually and physically, but also to heal the 7 generations before me and the 7 generations that will come after me. And that really is the true spiritual work of what all of you are doing in undoing racism and in reclaiming your humanity, is the healing of your past generations and also the healing of your future generations. That's true for all of us, and we all come from earth cultures, no matter what color we are. So a little bit of just bringing in the presence of this particular area. Many of you who have taken the time to learn the history of indigenous people in this area know that much of our land has been inhabited and cared for by Comanche people, Comanche Indians, for a long time before the arrival of Europeans, but also by Tanqua, also by Coahuilteca coming through this area, and also eventually by Mexica in their patterns. We also have the Kickapoo Indians in the South Texas area, who are actually Great Lakes Native people who were forced this way during their relocation, their disruption by European settlers. And so we have a lot of Native culture here in Texas. And some of the traditions that I was raised with from a very small child on come from the concheros, which are also a bicultural fusion of Mexica tradition, in our case, particularly Xinachli, Coatlicue, which is also Olmeca Chichimeca. So that's a particular tradition, a particular mesa that we were brought up with. And I've also been honored to be exposed and be taught and brought in by other groups, from the Acoma Pueblo in New Mexico to the Navajo in Dene in the Southwest, and Lakota Sioux. And so I will stick to what I know, which is right here in this Tex-Mex, Chicana, Coahuilteca, modern day, paying homage to what I have been brought up with. But what I can say I have seen in common in all the Native people and practices that I have come across is that we all understand that at one time we were all part of one family, and that we have all come into this world with a contribution and a meaning and a connection to our humanity. And that connection has been severed for a lot of us in various ways. But I know that as we heal ourselves, we help to heal the world that we live in. And like I said, we heal the 7 generations before and after us. I'll also really quickly say that I was blessed to learn a little more about this land that I have lived on and that I am made of, which is that one of the native names that was recorded by Europeans for the land that we're on is Yacatzol. Another is the Kate. But Yacatzol is a Nahuatl variant. It means nose. And it's because of the faces that we see in the limestone here in the Balcones Escarpment in the Edwards Plateau. And the reason that's important is because we know that the rocks are our elders, that they've been here, that they hold wisdom, that they're also our grandparents, our abuelos, our abuelas, and our families are in those stones. It is our birthright to connect to them and to understand this as our heritage, our herencia, our inheritance. The other really important piece is that I have learned, especially spending time in Mexico and other parts of Mesoamerica, that our colonization and detribalization and our internalized racial inferiority has led to a great gatekeeping and angst around Indigenous identity and what it means to be Indigenous. But I also know that as a person of Indigenous descent, that when I have stepped into and picked up these practices, my DNA has woken up, and that I know that I've been here before, and that this knowledge is here to pick up. That when you go into Mexico and you practice with Indigenous people in Mexico, there is much less of the politics and the identity and proving this and that. It's an appreciation for what it is, and it just is. So what I'm doing today could be interpreted as ceremony, but it's more somewhere in between, a grounding of letting you know who I am, letting you know how I practice. And very quickly, I'm just going to take us through a little bit of breathing and grounding where we are. So wherever you are, you don't have to be outside. You don't have to face the directions. I just want you to breathe along with me and think through. And I'm going to be honoring the different elements here along the way. So I encourage you to keep your eyes open or closed, whatever you want to do. But I want you to imagine, as I speak, what this means for you, to connect to your deepest root, to the land that you're connected to, the land that makes up you, and to healing the 7 generations before you and the 7 generations ahead. I encourage you to visualize the just and loving world that you want to see, in which we are all restored back to our humanity. And I encourage you to feel where in your body your DNA is waking up to the knowledge and the wisdom and the assuredness that exists in the earth cultures where you come from, wherever they are. So I will start by recognizing the east, which is actually behind me. You don't have to turn, but I will. And recognize where we come from, the fire that ignites us. In recognizing the fire today, I'm burning in my Poposhkomit, or Salmador. This is Copal from the Cerro de la Reina in Tonalá, Mexico. So this is the fire. We're connecting with the fire. We understand that we get life from the rising sun, from the new beginnings, from the youth, from the fresh spiritual aspects, from the bright light, the first light that illuminates and enlightens us. And we recognize the East, our guardians, and the Creator. Ometeotl. And when I say Ometeotl, I'm referring to Omi, which is 2, and Teotl, which is the divine, and the duality that exists in the divine. When we think about Turn here to the south. We recognize the water that gives us life, the water that we begin our life in the womb of our mother, the water that gives life on this planet. It's the same water that your grandparents drank and their grandparents drank. It's the water that your grandchildren or your great-grandnieces and nephews will drink after you. And it's the same water that's circulated between all of us everywhere on the world. It also gives us the lifeblood of the plants, our energy, and the trust and innocence that exists between us. Recognize the creator and your spirits and guides of the South. Ometeo. We recognize the West. We recognize the earth. And I've got here a little bit of ash, volcanic ash. This is from Oaxaca. A little bit of beautiful alkaline limestone soil from right here. And kernels of elote from Tonalá. And we recognize the West for the energy that's held, for the insight that we have when our life really gets going, for the reflection. We recognize the red path in the West. And we recognize the creators, your ancestors, the guides of the West. Ometeo. And finally, we think about the North, the spirit and the animo, our guides for the air and the wind, the energy of our animal friends and companions, and the animals that sustain us. We think of receiving energy and gaining wisdom. We give appreciation to our elders as they are entering the north of their life. The white of their hair like the white of the snow, and the wisdom that they bring that we absolutely cannot move forward without. We honor that energy of the north and our creators, ancestors, guides. Ometeo. And I will bring us back, bring your attention to your center. We also acknowledge our Father Sky, the heavens above us, the rains, the energy of the sun, without which none of us can thrive, our orientation that keeps us centered, even as the world is spinning and our experiences are so different. To our ancestors, our guides, and the creators of up above, and our Father Sky, we say, Ometeo. And to the earth below us, ever energizing, that if you've been on the screen too long, be sure to take your bare feet and get on the ground somewhere, because she will always take back your negative energy and transmute it back into grounding positive energy. To our Mother Earth below, we acknowledge, we thank our ancestors, our guides. Ometeo. And lastly, we come back to the center, deep inside, the center within every one of us, the center between each of us, the center to which we always return, the learning, the balance, that each of us is one part of the whole. To our guides, our ancestors of the very center, we thank you and honor you. We say Ometeot. Thank you for participating. I'll close really quick, and I know y'all need to get started because you have a very big, jam-packed assignment. But I want to encourage everyone to pace themselves in these hard times and to remember that we have a long history to fall back on, to pull knowledge from. I'm going to leave you with a vision that Chief Running Horse of the Wampanoag tribe had many, many, many years ago, before the 500 years. He actually had a vision that the tribes would come together from Alaska to Argentina, what we now know as those places, at the time of the 500 years of the coming of Columbus, which did in fact happen in Corpus Christi. So he was correct in his prediction of that about 100 years prior. But another vision that he had was about the four colors of humanity: the black, the white, the yellow, and the red. And of course, humanity exists among and between those colors. But the spirit of Chief Running Horse's dream went something like this: that it is the people of the black race who connect us from the heavens to the earth and keep us connected to the cosmos through the rhythm, through the drum. That it is the red people, the native people of this part of the world and of many parts of the world, who are the caretakers of the plant medicine and of the earth cultures, of, in many ways, what we now call the environment, but in particular, the biosphere and the plant world around us, that hold the knowledge of that medicine. That is the yellow race that mastered the human body, the knowledge of the human body, the ways that the human body carries energy, emits energy, manipulates energy. And it is the white race that are the builders, the innovators, the cultivators, the constructors, the combustors. And we need all four colors. The white race is also the youngest race and has been very out of balance in our existence in this particular world, but is certainly not alone in being out of balance. And that we are all waiting, all colors are waiting for the moment when we can exist in balance and bring the gifts that we all bring to humanity together. Remember that we are all one family again, hence all my relations. Aho mataquias. Ometeo. Thank you. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day.
Thank you so much, Carmen. And now we are going to move to introducing, and we'll hear from Paula Rojas from Communities of Color United, who couldn't be here this evening, but did record an audio clip. So we are going to hear a little bit of framing today about why we are here, some of their work around institutional racism in the city, and what are some of those issues. So we can go ahead and bring up that clip.
Hi, my name is Paula Rojas, and I'm a member of CCU. That's Communities of Color United for Racial Justice. And I'm here to bring a message from CCU. We're grateful that you all are here. We're grateful to USA for convening this event and the other organizations that are participating. and we are supportive, but we are not actively participating because it is Indigenous Peoples Day, and we have other community activities that we're involved in. But we wanted to send a message, give you a little background of our work that might inform some of the conversation tonight. CCU began in 2014 as a loose coalition of grassroots organizations in BIPOC communities in Austin, coming together, realizing that the transition from an at-large city council to 10-1 geographic opportunity districts opened up the possibility of us being able to impact issues on a citywide level. We wanted to advance our shared vision for racial justice in Austin, and we thought that one place we could exert our collective power was on the decisions made by our city's budget process. We passed a resolution on Mother's Day of 2015 asking for an equity tool to be developed and used by the city to make decisions on budget allocations and big policies, and we also pushed for a health equity assessment. It took the city a while to start these processes, and in the interim, we began to put forth a people's budget coming from CCU for the city to advance racial justice. The member organizations included ALGO, a queer people of color organization. ICE Out of Austin at the time was an arm of the Austin Immigrants' Rights Coalition, and Mama Sana Vibrant Woman were some of the founding organizations. Many have joined since, and it's also open to individuals who are BIPOC identified. What we started to do was think about how could our city be different. We know we're in a wealthy city. We know the divide along race and class lines is tremendous, and we know that it's possible to shift resources in order to begin to repair the hundreds of years of intentional systemic racist policies in our city. The frame that we used was to look at the city budget and think about what is our vision for a more just budget, and we developed a people's budget platform. Every year during budget cycles, we've come to City Council with hundreds of people to push for our shared vision. We spent a lot of time in many community conversations and potlucks, talking to hundreds and hundreds of our members to ask what it is that we would want to prioritize. That is how we came up with the real solutions over years. But basically what we're talking about is, one, defunding APD, the police department. It's something we've been pushing for from the beginning. At first we were asking for a reduction in police funding, then we were asking for a freeze in police funding, but we've always looked at taking from the current overinflated police budget as a place to then move resources towards the vision of what we would like. So we aren't only interested in fighting against the problem of an overinflated police budget. Yes, that's a problem. It's a problem in most cities around the country. It's a problem that we've had for a good 25 years that then was exacerbated after 9/11. That is one piece of the problem. But we want to look at the whole monster. And what we realize is the police are the heavy-handed security forces of a larger system, a monster that is under-resourcing our communities in other ways. To solve the problem, we also need to invest seriously in the needs of our local community. And that's what we mean by real solutions. So the R is the RISE Fund, which is giving direct cash assistance to families impacted by COVID-19. And the numbers, the thousands of families who have lost work or have been impacted economically and health-wise are disproportionately Black and brown families in Austin. We need much more resources going to the RISE Fund. E is the Equity Office. We fought for an Equity Office. and the Equity Office is grounded and giving direction on how to advance equity in every aspect of city government, but they are incredibly underfunded, don't have the capacity to do the work that they would want to do. A is Austin Public Health. Anytime, but especially during a pandemic, we need to focus more resources to our local health department that, when not in times of crisis, takes care of only low-income families who have no other option, who are disproportionately Black and brown families as well. And during times of crisis like this, those are the families that are not receiving all of the support that they need because the health department does not have enough resources to go around. And lastly, low-income housing. One of the ways that the racial divide is growing in Austin is by the exponential increase in rents, which is driving out poor and working class, disproportionately Black and brown families out of the city, or having to double up or becoming homeless. Even before the pandemic, that is now being greatly exacerbated due to the pandemic. And unless our city puts serious money into not just affordable housing, but low-income housing, then the racial divide will only continue. We are more interested in advancing the vision of what we do want than in fighting to cut back policing. Both go together, but we can't just focus on defunding police without focusing on what it is that we need to invest in. As we stand on the shoulders of the abolitionists against slavery, today what we mean by abolition is that we have to invest in our communities in order to create the vision of the world that we want to live in, that would be more just, loving, and equitable for all, not just fighting against the systems that are harming us. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much to Paula and Communities of Color United. So now I will introduce our moderators. Chris Harris is a native Texan and passionate advocate working to transform the criminal legal system. He currently serves as the Director of Criminal Justice Programs for Texas Appleseed, a public interest nonprofit that promotes social and economic justice for all Texans. Chris has contributed to winning campaigns aimed at limiting racial disparities in the criminal justice system, state violence, and low-level arrests, ICE detentions, pre-trial incarceration, subpar indigent defense, and investment in police and prisons. Rachel Manning is a social worker who works in the criminal legal system and a member of Undoing White Supremacy Austin. She has been a part of USA's campaigns to fund Austin's communities and not policing for several years. So now I will turn it over to Rachel and Chris.
Thank you so much, Bethany. We are actually, unfortunately, missing Chris right now due to some ongoing technical difficulties. So while that is very much too bad, the show will go on. So thank you, Bethany, thank you, Carmen, thank you, Paula and CCU for bringing us all of this wonderful framing today on Indigenous Peoples Day. I'd like to welcome our candidates from so we have Greg Kassar, we have Ben Easton, and we have Ramses Supavea, all here from the District 4 race. Can we get these folks spotlighted to join me up here? Wonderful, thank you so much. We are so glad that y'all are here spending the evening with us on the day before early voting begins. So thank you for being here. So just a quick moment, the format will kind of be as follows. We have a few yes and no questions that we will be asking you to answer, and then we have some And then we have some short answers. We are running a little bit behind, but we're not going to worry too much about it because we're really excited to have you here and to hear from you this evening. So what the candidates have received the questions this morning, and we're going to try and just get yes and no questions at the beginning. We'll allow them to speak and answer those questions right at the beginning, and then they'll have 90 seconds for short answers towards the end of the program. So welcome and thank you so much for being here. What we are going to do now is we're going to have a moment where we hear from each of you, just a 1-minute quick statement introducing yourself, what you're running for, and you've heard from Communities of Color United this afternoon, and just a little bit of reflection on what that means to you and to your campaign. So Ben, you have 1 minute.
Yes, good afternoon, good evening. Can you hear me? Yes, okay, good. So first of all, thank you all to the hosts and sponsors. I do appreciate it. Carmen, that was awesome. I really appreciate your context. So I came here today to be just very antagonistic and to push back on this whole thing. I'm still going to do that, but I'm going to do it in a measured way because that's what it deserves. I'm truly inspired by Carmen's lead, but also the rest of you too. I mean, I appreciate that there's some serious, so I'm running for District 10, by the way. So I'm a teacher, I'm a writer, I'm a philosopher, I'm a latter-day caveman. So, and I'm a white man, I'm a white boy, I'm a privileged, I'm a former recovering spoiled brat from River Oaks in Houston, Texas. I'm a 12-step guy. I'm a recovering alcoholic addict. I'm a recovering, Haagen-Dazs eater, and I worship at the Church of the Open Sky. So I love the idea of all of us coming together and figuring out whatever we need to figure out. So what I don't like is what I see as the alienating grammar and languaging by some of your communities that I believe are either as racist or worse than some of the things that you accuse so-called white.
Mr. Easton, I'm just going to interrupt you there because these are 1-minute statements and we're going to try and fit everyone in. So thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you.
Rachel, you are currently muted.
Oh, I apologize. Ramses, would you like to go next?
Sure. First, happy Indigenous Peoples Day, as well as LGBT History Month. My name is Ramses. I'm a self-funded gay eco-socialist. I am pro-Black, brown, LGBTQIA, Indigenous rights, women's rights, for drug and sex work decriminalization, healthcare for all, slavery reparations, thriving wages, abolishing police unions and qualified immunity, getting money out of politics and enacting ranked choice voting, a Green New Deal, and overall, all things progressive. Thank you.
Can you just tell us briefly what you're running for?
Oh, for council for.
Thank you very much. And last but definitely not least, Greg, can we get you unmuted? You have a minute to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us and for grounding us before we started. I'm Greg Casad. I was an immigrants' rights organizer pushing also for racial and economic justice at City Hall before running for office. And I'm running to continue that work, not only to pass progressive policy and to be a pro-worker city and a city that's fighting against the continued racial and class divide in our community, but also when I've seen how in the last few years when communities organize, they've made really significant change. Formerly incarcerated people passing our fair chance hiring ordinance, and then pushing to block expansion of new jails and ending fines and arrests for low-level marijuana possession. I've seen how communities have organized in my own district to block out-of-state investors from evicting them and to buy their own mobile home communities and stay in place. And especially on issues of the policing budget, I had proposed amendments to make small incremental change in the past, but we've seen how organizing across the country has made transformative change. And I think we need to move from that incremental change to truly transformative change if we want to see more racial and economic justice in our city.
Thank you so much. So to start, we have several yes or no questions. I really am going to hold y'all to a yes or a no on these questions. So I'll be reading them out, and they are the exact same as y'all received this morning. So I will start at the top. In August, after an overwhelming public outrage over police brutality, community members calling to defund APD by 50%, City Council reallocated a small percentage of APD's outsized budget to EMS mental health response, housing for homeless residents, and behavioral health programs, and created the Decouple and Imagine funds. The Reimagine Public Safety Task Force was created so that community members can guide the intentional creation of non-policing alternatives for public safety. Will you commit to honor the recommendations and timelines of the Reimagining Task Force and not return those funds to APD even if more time is needed in the reimagining process? Can I hear yes or no's from our candidates here? We've got...
Yes, I'm...
So we've got a yes for Ramses and a no from Ben, and that was a yes from Greg. Thank you very much. The next question is, across Austin, increased policing paves the way for gentrification. For example, the Riverside Togetherness Project, launched in April 2019, envisions a crime reduction program led by the police department that would position the neighborhood for revitalization. Just 6 months later, the council approved the Domain on Riverside development, clearing the way for the displacement of thousands of low-income Austinites. Will you commit to ending the Riverside Togetherness Project and any similar initiatives that furthers the displacement of Black and brown residents through policing?
Yes, and I also voted against that project.
Okay, so Ramses, do you want to we can all speak this as this is how we're doing.
Okay, I thought we were done. Okay,
yeah. We were, but there's a smaller number of you, so yes. And then Ben, you said no, you won't commit to that.
I will not.
That's as much context as we're giving. Thank you very much.
Okay.
The next 4 questions pertain to aspects of CCU's Real Solutions platform, which was outlined before by Paula from CCU. So the first question is, Austin's Black, brown, and immigrant communities have been the hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, and many service sector and domestic workers remain unemployed. Many are ineligible for federal programs and are threatened by eviction. Many of those hardest hit were also already struggling to fulfill their basic needs before the pandemic, and this will only intensify once eviction protections are lifted and people face massive accumulated rent pavements. Other cities such as Stockton, California, and Jackson, Mississippi are facing this challenge by committing to a monthly guaranteed income for their most impacted residents. Will you commit to extend the direct financial assistance provided by the RISE Fund into a monthly guaranteed income to ensure that residents have access to their basic needs?
Yes.
Yes. Right?
No.
That sounds good.
Okay. And Ben?
No.
You will not commit to that. Okay. The Equity Office, this is the third question, plays a vital role in evaluating the impact of policy proposals on BIPOC communities and holding all city departments accountable to advancing racial equity. But currently their recommendations are not taken seriously, and other city departments do not proactively use the office to analyze their own policies and practices. Will you commit to honor the recommendations of the Equity Office and work with other city departments to also do so?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Thank you very much. The next question is, Austin Public Health has been underfunded for years as resources were allocated instead to a bloated police department. We have seen the result in the disproportionate rate of illnesses and death from the COVID-19 from COVID-19 in Black and Latinx communities, due in part to higher rates of underlying conditions because of their inability to access healthcare. We are all paying the price with the department too small to handle the necessary tasks of the pandemic. Will you commit to scaling up funding for Austin Public Health by $43.4 million in the next fiscal year to put us back on track for being a public health department that is able to protect the health and well-being of all Austinites?
Yes.
No.
Yes, getting there will probably require federal help, but yes.
Okay. And the last of these questions, thank you for answering all of these. As housing costs in Austin continue to rise, longtime Austin residents continue being displaced as wealthier white residents move into areas such as East Austin, where Black and brown residents created a thriving community despite being uprooted by the 1928 master plan that refused to provide city services for non-white residents living west of I-35. Will you commit to stop displacement by following the recommendations of the People's Plan, preserving low-income housing in all of its forms, apartments, single-family homes, and multiplexes in the Eastern Crescent, in the midst of pressure to develop new housing and further density?
Yes.
No.
Yes, I'd do everything to preserve low-income housing we can.
Thank you so much. So we're really excited to share the next bit, which is we have 3 questions from Austin residents, 2 of which are here by video, and then we're going to ask you all, as we discussed as discussed, to share your thoughts on those in 90 seconds. And we are running behind, so we're gonna try and keep those to 90 seconds. Can we get the first video? Thank you so much.
A survivor of the racist war on drugs and a person in long-term recovery from what the World Health Organization, National Institute of Health, and National Institute on Drug Abuse recognize as public health issues. I have received only pleas, pain, and punishment in my engagement with the criminal legal system, while wealthier and whiter individuals instead consistently received opportunities for wellness and justice outside of incarceration. This is a clear reflection of how policing harms our communities through criminalizing and persecuting us instead of supporting our needs. Will you commit to ending all forms of police involvement in behavioral health crisis responses? And how will you ensure that the voices of directly impacted community members are heard in the development of alternatives so that the reimagined system doesn't have the same punitive impact on individuals and communities?
Thank you. Candidates, could you hear that question? Did that come through? Okay. Okay, great. So we are going to, we're going to give Ben, I'm going to ask you to speak first, and then we're going to move to Ramses and then to Greg. And if you go up first to respond to the question, you have 90 seconds, a minute and a half.
Very good. And you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much.
All right. So, so my quick answer is no, because I'm a linguist and I pay attention to the word. So ending all forms, and I say no. It depends on the context. Now, I do appreciate that the police department could certainly use reforms. The budget always needs a good, sharp eye. That's true for all organizations at all times, regardless. So that's the case now. I generally believe that if it's truly a behavioral health situation and it's just somebody that's having a really bad day and there's some kind of freak out, I don't know, just whatever it is, but it doesn't call on, it doesn't require policemen and police women pulling their guns and tasers, then of course they shouldn't. They should stay out of it. But I also know situations where that could escalate. So to give it a blanket handling is absurd. So generally, let's do rethink and redo. I know I only have a few seconds left. I would just say some of the wording in here is the bloated police department. You know, no, I don't like a whole lot of the wording here. It's very it's very tilted, if you ask me. So the police can certainly need to clean up some of their behavior, but it ain't nearly as bad as most of the wording in this document. Thank you.
Thank you for being so timely. I appreciate that. Ramses, do you want to go next? You have 90 seconds to respond to the question from David Johnson.
Yes, I believe in the overall sentiment of the question. I think that we should be hiring mental health professionals to deal with mental health issues. I believe in listening directly to impacted communities and reaching out to those communities who are disproportionately affected by community policing. I believe in rehabilitation and education instead of putting people in human zoos, that is, jails and prisons. I believe in decriminalizing all drugs, kind of like what Portugal did, because drugs are a public health issue, not a criminal issue. And overall, I do believe in transforming in how we behave as a society and how we enforce our laws and which way works. And right now, policing, you can't shoot your problems away. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg? Oh, we need to unmute you somehow. We're not hearing you.
Oh, I think it's you. I think when you mute yours, there was like a AC.
We've got you back. Okay.
Well, I believe that we can't solve behavioral health issues through policing. You can't solve homelessness through jails. You can't solve so many of the issues in our community simply through continued policing. I think that the needless killing of David Joseph, a teenager experiencing a mental health crisis, was one of the most horrific killings of a person by a police officer, and not just in our city, but across the country. We needed a different kind of response for David and his family. Tanya Silva, a young person who wound up in an immigrant detention center simply because she had a mental health crisis, and police were sent instead of people who would care for her. And so we absolutely need to build that different system. And I'm regularly in touch with people like David's family as they help advise us on how to build the kind of system that he and others so badly and desperately deserved. It's a shame that we haven't had that system in this city.
Thank you all for your answers on those questions. The next video that we have is, so now I'll introduce a question from Miriam, who's a member of Iceberg de Austin, who recorded a video for us, or for y'all actually, to ask y'all a question.
When I'm driving on Riverside and see a police on my rear view mirror, I don't feel safe. I think of how my husband was stopped last winter for his window tint being too dark. Arrested and then was sent to the Pearson Detention Center for 6 months during the peak of COVID-19 and was deported, leaving me to be the sole provider of our 3 children who are all under 10 years old. I drive through Riverside every day to get to my job in a taco truck. What would happen to my children if they stopped me too? The thing that really makes me feel safe is if I could afford to stay at home during this pandemic, to feed my family, and have accessible health care. How would you ensure that Austin overspreading on police is redirected into financial resources for all Austinites.
Fantastic. We're going to switch up the order this time. We're going to start with Greg, and we'll go in the reverse order this time.
Well, first, I appreciate her sharing her story, and it's a story that I hear all the time from community members and constituents. We need to redirect more resources, although we made really significant change, historic change in this budget. We know that there's still so much work to do. There's still lots of police officers being sent in riot gear on overtime to protests. We still know that we're spending all this police time on false burglar alarms. There are so many places where dollars can be redirected, and I'm supportive of those community groups that are working on doing that. And bringing those dollars to replenish the RISE Fund, I think, would be a great use of that money. I was proud to work with many of you on this call alongside the Mayor Pro Tem to co-sponsor and create that fund. We've distributed help to thousands of families, but we know there are thousands that didn't get that help and that badly need it, along with the sort of immigrant legal services and other services that are so badly needed that she raised in that video. And we also obviously need federal change to bring deportations as close to zero as we can in this community.
Thank you so much. Ramses, you have a minute and a half.
Well, I used to live off of Riverside, and there was always somebody stopped off of Riverside, and I think this kind of police trap it's a war on the district. You're not only I don't believe it's making communities safer by stopping them and taking them, and then for frivolous whatever laws they may or allegedly may or may not have broken, and then now you get to the deportations. I don't believe any human is illegal. Just not to go on a tangent, I believe the city budget is 40% is way too much. I believe we should be spending and divesting and investing in times of global pandemic on new issues that arise, such as affordable housing, affordable healthcare, PPE access, education, small business resuscitation, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Ben, could you have a minute and a half to respond to Miriam's question.
All right. Yes, I mean, as sad as her story is, my response, first of all, is, believe it or not, I agree with Ramses on drugs and alcohol. I'm a libertarian. I believe in legalizing drugs, all drugs, to people of majority. You know, not to children, but adults. You know, if you want to do that in the privacy of your own home, that's great. So policing should not affect that, and that would be a huge shift. Now, driving down the street with tinted windows that are too black, I don't like that personally. I think that's actually very irresponsible. Now, I have no idea, wasn't there. Was he doing something illegal? I truly, of course, don't know. So if he was just pulled over because a cop wanted to pick on him, that's terrible. That's bad policing. That's persecution. So I'm against that, absolutely. Do I believe in giving money to immigrants or to people that have lived here for 600 years? No. I believe in minimal welfare, minimal social I'll just say it this way, that a safety net probably needs to be there. That's part of the function of a good society, but it should be minimal. So I don't believe in expanding it. I don't want to see that grow. I would be in favor of keeping it minimal and to use our brains to make it effective and to make it good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our last question is, it's our final short answer question. So I will go ahead and read this. The Austin Police Department was created in 1865 to control newly freed Black people who were, quote unquote, congregating in and about Austin in freedmen's towns. The early history of Austin includes the City Council and the Austin Police Department working hand in hand to displace these formerly vibrant communities through zoning and policing. Today, Black Austinites continue to be displaced at an alarming rate. The Austin Police Department has come under fire for continuing its legacy of police brutality and arresting for addiction and mental health issues. City Council has continued to greenlight zoning changes that make way for high-cost developments that threaten the existence of Black and brown neighborhoods such as Riverside and Montopolis. In a UT Austin study about why African Americans left Austin, one participant put it this way: "They didn't want to redo Austin when we were living in it. We saw what was happening in Austin. They were trying to get all the property in Austin they could get. The city was taking land, jacking up prices. The gentrification started settling in. Residents are sick to their stomachs seeing what they see. If elected, how will you commit to exit this alliance with the police for the displacement of Black Austinites and invest in their right to return?" Ben, we're gonna switch this back up and start with you.
Okay. So, I mean, it would be insane of me to advocate the historical injustices, and so of course I won't. That's, generations ago, what predominantly white people did to Black, brown, yellow, green, and blue was a bummer, and it was bad, and it was criminal, and it was not good. Nowadays, do I see that, and am I a part of it? No. Do I believe that most white people are a part of that? No. Do I believe that there's a systemic racist thing going on with the police department and with the city council and with governing bodies? And I say no. Gentrification, the whole affordability thing, I think, is a victim battle cry. I can't afford a house personally where I want to live. So am I crying about it? No. I work 2 jobs and I make the best of it and I pay rent. But nobody is trying to drive me out as a white person or a Black or a brown or a polka dotted. So I'm not sympathetic to that whole gentrification affordability thing. So I say, gut it out, pull up your bootstraps, and be a law-abiding citizen. Do your best, and if you can't afford it, then move. Thanks.
Okay, Greg, you want to take it from here? You have 90 seconds.
In the St. John community, in the heart of District 4, we've seen it, how it is that we can turn the tide. There is a 20-acre piece of city-owned land there that was the city bought to put a criminal justice complex, a police station and courthouse, right in a historically Black neighborhood. When I knocked on doors in that area, nobody wanted there to be a police station and courthouse in St. John. It's disrespectful and it's wrong. But once we knocked on hundreds of doors and organized thousands of people around the project, now we've gotten the city to abandon that plan, which was really just a horrible plan, and to actually bring low-cost housing to the community and for purchase, along with community services and green space, so that people can return. And we're creating a real partnership there for displaced Black Austinites to come back to their neighborhood. If we did nothing, if we just left it alone and just the single-family zoning that exists and didn't touch it and left that piece of property to sit, we would still see gentrification. And so we need to be proactive, organize the community, and take active steps to push back against the displacement that we see happening in neighborhoods like St. John.
Thank you. Ramses, you have 90 seconds.
Well, first, I believe if we wish to understand our current situation, we must look back into history. And when you enslave people and strip them of their culture, resources, and pass laws against their welfare, we will still see repercussions even generations later. So it's hard to climb up the socioeconomic ladder when you don't have intergenerational wealth or transfer of wealth. So we have to look back at history and why people are the way they are now. This didn't happen yesterday. Gentrification didn't happen yesterday. So I believe in divesting and investing divesting from community policing and investing in community enrichment. I believe in addressing the disproportionate community policing towards minorities and people of color, and instead investing in affordable housing, access to education, access to healthcare, access to the necessary resources and the social capital for the overall community's prosperity. There's a thing called equity, and then fairness, and then equality, and they're not all the same. If you give every person the same amount of, let's say, $1, we have to ask, well, how much did they have before? So we have to provide with the necessary resources to every person's needs so that they don't get pushed out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that concludes our questions, and we actually made up a little bit of time, so we're not running quite as late as we were from our late start. We do at this point have some time in which we want to hear closing statements, or we have a final question for y'all, and this is everyone will have 2 minutes to answer this question. So here it is. Why should voters who care about racial equity trust you to put their well-being ahead of institutions like the Police Association and developers who want to continue the status quo of violent policing, poverty, and displacement of Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are residents of Austin? Ben, we'll start with you again.
Okay. So why should they trust me? First of all, I'm doing a minimal campaign. I don't want donations, have not asked for them, won't accept them, don't want endorsements. What I'm hoping for is individuals to just, with your own mind, look at me and look at the facts and look at the alternatives. And maybe you're not in my district. So I mean, look at the choices and use your brain, use your mind, use your gut, use your instinct. Let's see. I guess my general thing though here is, like, I don't even know what most of these acronyms are, because although you probably don't believe me, but I'm basically colorblind. Did I grow up in a racist or a bigoted family and neighborhood? Probably most people think so. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But like, I don't believe in using words like BIPOC, brown and Black, Indigenous, people of color. Well, so what does that make me? So I believe using that kind of language is actually alienating, and it will prolong what apparently this forum is trying to fight. So, and like the whole Black Lives Matter, I think that's ridiculous, to make that your battle cry. Well, what about us whites? What about us reds? What about us blues? So I don't use that. I don't capitalize the word Black. I think that's ridiculous. Now, what do I do though instead is I be respectful, I be fair, and I bend over backwards to treat everyone the same. And I'm a damn good person. Talk to anybody. So that's pretty much it. I do appreciate being here, and I appreciate this forum, and I've been inspired today by most of what's been said, if not all of what's been said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ramses, you have 2 minutes to respond to the question and close up anything else that you would like to say.
Well, I'd like to just recapitulate. I'm a self-funded gay eco-socialist. I'm pro-Black, brown, LGBTQIA, women's rights, Indigenous rights. I'm for drug and sex work decriminalization, health care for all, slavery reparations, thriving wages, abolishing police unions, and qualified immunity, so that we held people in position who are in position hold them accountable, and not just give them carte blanche to do whatever, and just because they are afraid of their life, they can shoot at people, abolishing police unions, qualified immunity, getting money out of politics, and enacting ranked choice voting, a Green New Deal on all things progressive, yeah, that's ultimately it's up to the voters to decide who represents them the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Greg, you have 2 minutes to respond to the question and any final thoughts you might have.
I'm just so humbled to be a part of the movement in Austin and to be able to participate in that movement, because I've seen organizations push City Hall to do things that previously were thought to be impossible. I remember just how many meetings and fights we had to just push to get the city to get require $11 an hour for some construction workers on a few projects, and how many years and how hard fought some of those fights were. But really, in the resurgence of a lot of community organizations representing working class communities of color, there's been really significant wins in our city. And of course, the divides still are very real, but in many ways, y'all are leading the country in how it is that a city in the South can start to swim upstream towards doing things better. When I came on the council, there were lots of city employees and people working on city contracts making as little as $7.25. And just in a few years, we ramped that requirement up to $15 an hour, and we have to go far beyond that. We have decriminalized the curfew. We have ended arrests and fines for low-level marijuana offenses. We've dropped Class C misdemeanor arrests by a huge number because of the organizing that was done around Freedom Cities. We started the first publicly funded deportation defense fund in Texas and inspired other cities to do the same. One of the only cities that's ever rejected a police association contract until we got better transparency and accountability. We created the Office of Police Oversight. We led this statewide lawsuit against Senate Bill 4 and passed new rules protecting people against those show me your papers laws. We even declared today Indigenous Peoples Day, and when it was proposed at first for it to be both Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day on the calendar, we worked together with organizers and I sponsored the amendment just to make it Indigenous Peoples Day. And I think it's that continued connection of outside pressure and then inside advocacy that has helped push us and that I think we have to do in much bigger measure. And I think you're starting to see those more transformational measures come forward, like the changes to the police budget that are just so much bigger than anything we've ever worked on the budget in these last few years, like Proposition A that brings real mass transit to our communities while including the biggest anti-displacement fund, not only in the city's history, but we haven't found another transit project in America that has included $300 million for anti-displacement. So we built these incremental fights, and it's now time for us to keep organizing for more transformational change.
Thank you all so much. Thank you to the candidates and to all of the folks who participated in framing this event. We are lucky that we get to do this again right now. We have candidates from districts 2, 6, and 7 who are going to be showing up in just a couple moments. And so I want to just thank the candidates from District 4 and District 10 for showing up and talking with us this evening, and happy early voting tomorrow and happy Indigenous Peoples Day. And we're going to pause for just a moment to work out the technical kind of issues with our next candidates, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. questions and answers from our next candidate. So thank you all for your patience. I encourage y'all to take a few deep breaths as we, approach the evening, as the sun goes down, and take a moment to get up and stretch, and we will be right back in just a few moments.
Also, if you are a candidate, if you can just practice unmuting yourself and make sure that you can hear us and we can hear you.
Somebody's got to go first. Can you hear me?
Candidate forum of the night, and I am going to give the floor first to our interpreters, and for the interpretation announcements, due to our commitment to language justice. So whoever is making the interpretation announcement, Vic, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. I think we cannot hear you. Let me.
We still can't hear you.
We are, so we're going to make you not an interpreter so that we're able to hear you. Okay, apparently that is not possible, since that's how it was set up. So I wonder if it's possible to call in on another device, there with phone audio. Hold tight, everyone, just a couple of minutes and we will get this glitch worked out.
Hi, Bethany. I think there's an issue with hearing Vic, and it's because people have not selected the language interpretation yet. And so only if you selected the language interpretation can we hear Vic.
Yes, and it's so we are unable to make him not an interpreter because that's the way the system was set up. And so that's why not everyone is able to hear. So I think, is it possible?
Yes.
I wonder if Tanya, you would be able to do it because I think we can make you not an interpreter because you were not initially on the. Let's try that. Maria, is that possible?
Yes. And the other thing, Bethany, sorry, I apologize. Vic is asking if you can give the language instructions.
I will do the best that I can. So please bear with me. But yes, because I think that looks like the only option that we're having. So if you are hearing this on Facebook, you can click on the link in the live caption. The link in the caption on the Facebook Live video to hear this in Spanish. And for those who are listening in Zoom, you can pick a channel and just remember everybody to please speak slowly so that the interpreters will be able to interpret you. And of course, only one person speak at a time. And if you are bilingual, use one language at a time. Also, so then I will repeat in Spanish. Si está escuchando en el Facebook, se puede tocar el enlace abajo del video y se puede escoger la opción en el canal de español. Abajo en el derecho después de que está en la enlace de Zoom. Y por favor, si está hablando, solo habla despacio y una persona habla a la vez y habla un idioma a la vez si eres bilingüe. Gracias. Okay, so I will go ahead and open this now. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our City Council Forum on Institutional Racism, co-sponsored by Communities of Color United for Racial Justice, Grassroots Leadership, and Undoing White Supremacy Austin. So we heard earlier from candidates from District 4 and 10, and now we will be hearing from candidates of District 2, 6, and 7. So we are so glad that you're able to join us today on this Indigenous Peoples Day. And now I would like to introduce Carmen Llanes Pulido for land acknowledgement.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm very honored to be asked to ground us in an acknowledgement of the land. I'm very humbled to do this with all respect and permission of my elders and those who have passed some of these traditions to me. I want to first share with you all just who I am and where I come to this from. As a modern day Chicana, like many Mexican Americans, we are people indigenous to this continent, as well as part European, many of us, and part African, many of us. But many of us carry the dominant part of our ancestry from this very continent. And for me, like many Chicanos, while we have been very detribalized, disconnected from the specific tribes, I have been very, very grateful to have been brought up on a red path in a red road, leaning into my tradition, learning more about my family, my culture, in particular, a route to the Coahuilteca people who have been in this particular area from northern Mexico to the Balcones Escarpment since before the Aztec Mexica people made their migration from the southwest into central Mexico. I've also been brought up with the traditions of the concheros, which is a bicultural indigenous tradition, also from northern Mexico and Texas, specifically the mesa of Chinachli, Coatlicue, Olmeca Chichimeca, which doesn't translate to Spanish because it's not Spanish. And so that's where many of the traditions that I share now come from. And I also have been very grateful to be in exchange with many Native people and earth cultures across this continent. In particular, because I can't be with you all today in person, I'll just share with you how I'm honoring Indigenous Peoples Day today with, this is a Popochcomit, also known as a Salmador, in which I'm burning copal from Cerro de la Reina, which is the Queen's Mountain. Sorry, I'm already breaking the bilingual rules. In central Mexico in Tonalá. It was given to me by an elder named Tlacati. And this is clay from Tonalá. So we're honoring a fire with this. We're honoring the earth with a little bit of volcanic ash, also from southern Mexico and Oaxaca, mixed with a little bit of our beautiful alkaline limestone and clay soil here in central Texas, and a little bit of corn, also from Tonalá. And we are honoring the water as well, which we also have, which is the water that we drink that keeps us alive. It's our lifeblood for everything living on Earth. It's also the same water that your grandparents drank and your great-grandparents drink, and that your grandchildren will drink, or like me, your grandnieces and nephews. So we are honoring all of the elements: the fire, the air that we breathe as it rises. Some cultures will also smoke tobacco. And in particular, in grounding ourselves, I want you to imagine, visualize, and feel, as we go through the directions, what this means for you all to be connected to this land that you're on now, but to also know that in your lineage, no matter where you come from, black, white, yellow, red, or anything in between, that we all come from earth cultures, from indigenous cultures that have had grounding practices with our land. So as we learn to come back into balance here in the United States, what we know now in this American continent, from what we call Alaska to Argentina, all the way to Newfoundland, that there have been people stewarding the land, migrating on this land, and caring for our land, understanding that we are part of this land for as long as people have been here. And we're kind of like the nopal, the prickly pear cactus. You can cut it down, but you can scatter it, but it will find its roots here in the land. This particular area that we're on this incredible convergence of three kinds of land right here in Central Texas. And one of the native names that was given to this area, recorded at least by Europeans, and that we understand to be known by many of the native people in this area, is Yacatzol, also Decate, but Yacatzol in particular, which is derived from the Nahuatl word, which is a Mesoamerican family of languages for the nose. So when we look at the limestone in the Balcones Escarpment in the Edwards Plateau, we actually see our families. We see our grandparents. Those are our grandparents. This is our birthright. And we have been here and we will be here. And people have always migrated in these lands. This in particular is what Christians might call a holy land for Native people, for red people. It always has been. So while we know the Comanche were in this land for many, 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 many generations, the Tanqua, the Kickapoo in South Texas, who actually came from the Great Lakes, the Coahuilteca from northern Mexico into this area, all people have recognized this place as a sacred and important, beautiful place. And just as we belong to this land also works on us, whether we're from here or we just got here. So I don't want to take up too much time, but I encourage you all to take a moment. Let's take at least one breath together and acknowledge our ancestors from the East, the new beginnings, the children, the enlightenment, the light that comes into our life. We acknowledge in the South our connection to the water that your grandparents drank, the water that your grandchildren will drink. We connect with the West, the most productive time for many of us in our life, a grounding with the earth, a harvest. We thank our guides and our ancestors from the West, and we acknowledge the North. The North is our wisdom. It is the old age. It's our elders as their hair turns white like the snow in winter. We acknowledge our ancestors and our guides of the North. We come back to the center. We acknowledge our Father in the sky, that no matter where we are on this blue planet, we look up and we recognize the sky above us. We orient ourselves upward. We give knowledge. We acknowledge and give thanks to our ancestors and guides and creators of the sky. We also acknowledge our mother below us, that no matter where we are, we can connect our skin, our bare feet and hands to the ground and be renewed, because our mother will take our energy and transmute it back and give us life. We honor our mother and our ancestors and guides from below. And we come back to the center within us, the center between us, the center that connects us, the center from within, our balance, our learning, our connection. For all of this, we say, Ome Teot. Ome is two, Teot is the divine, and the recognition of the masculine, the feminine in all of us. And though there are many different native traditions from this continent, we all recognize that at one time we were all part of the same family, that we drink the same water, live from the same earth, breathe the same air, and we cook from the same fire. We feel the same heat. And as you heal yourself, as you do this healing work of undoing racism, you heal the 7 generations before you, and you heal the 7 generations in front of you. Ometeot, Ahometakweyase, all my relations. Thank you. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day.
Carmen. So now we will hear from Paula Rojas from CCU, who couldn't be here with us today, but has recorded some context for us about the work that CCU is doing and issues of racial equity and structural racism in the city.
Hi, my name is Paula Rojas, and I'm a member of CCU. That's Communities of Color United for Racial Justice. And I'm here to bring a message from CCU. We're grateful that you all are here. We're grateful to USA for convening this event and the other organizations that are participating. And we are supportive, but we are not actively participating because it is Indigenous Peoples Day and we have other community activities that we're involved in. But we wanted to send a message, give you a little background of our work that might inform some of the conversation tonight. CCU began in 2014 as a loose coalition of grassroots organizations in BIPOC communities in Austin, coming together, realizing that the transition from an at-large city council to 10-1 geographic opportunity districts opened up the possibility of us being able to impact issues on a citywide level. We wanted to advance our shared vision for racial justice in Austin, and we thought that one place we could exert our collective power was on the decisions made by our city's budget process. We passed a resolution on Mother's Day of 2015 asking for an equity tool to be developed and used by the city to make decisions on budget allocations and big policies, and we also pushed for an health equity assessment. It took the city a while to start these processes, and in the interim, we began to put forth a people's budget coming from CCU for the city to advance racial justice. The member organizations included ALGO, a queer people of color organization. ICE Out of Austin at the time was an arm of the Austin Immigrants' Rights Coalition, and Mama Sana Vibrant Woman were some of the founding organizations. Many have joined since, and it's also open to individuals who are BIPOC identified. What we started to do was think about how could our city be different. We know we're in a wealthy city. We know the divide along race and class lines is tremendous, and we know that it's possible to shift resources in order to begin to repair the hundreds of years of intentional systemic racist policies in our city. The frame that we used was to look at the city budget and think about what is our vision for a more just budget, and we developed a people's budget platform. Every year during budget cycles, we've come to City Council with hundreds of people to push for our shared vision. We spent a lot of time in many community conversations and potlucks, talking to hundreds and hundreds of our members to ask what it is that we would want to prioritize. That is how we came up with the real solutions over years. But basically what we're talking about is, one, defunding APD, the police department. It's something we've been pushing for from the beginning. At first we were asking for a reduction in police funding, then we were asking for a freeze in police funding, but we've always looked at taking from the current overinflated police budget as a place to then move resources towards the vision of what we would like. So we aren't only interested in fighting against the problem of an overinflated police budget. Yes, that's a problem. It's a problem in most cities around the country. It's a problem that we've had for a good 25 years that then was exacerbated after 9/11. That is one piece of the problem. But we want to look at the whole monster. And what we realize is the police are the heavy-handed security forces of a larger system, a monster that is under-resourcing our communities in other ways. To solve the problem, we also need to invest seriously in the needs of our local community. And that's what we mean by real solutions. So the R is the RISE Fund, which is giving direct cash assistance to families impacted by COVID-19. And the numbers, the thousands of families who have lost work or have been impacted economically and health-wise are disproportionately Black and brown families in Austin. We need much more resources going to the RISE Fund. E is the Equity Office. We fought for an Equity Office, and the Equity Office is grounded and giving direction on how to advance equity in every aspect of city government, but they are incredibly underfunded, don't have the capacity to do the work that they would want to do. A is Austin Public Health. Anytime, but especially during a pandemic, we need to focus more resources to our local health department that, when not in times of crisis, takes care of only low-income families who have no other option, who are disproportionately Black and brown families as well. And during times of crisis like this, those are the families that are not receiving all of the support that they need because the health department does not have enough resources to go around. And lastly, low-income housing. One of the ways that the racial divide is growing in Austin is by the exponential increase in rents, which is driving out poor and working class, disproportionately Black and brown families out of the city, or having to double up or becoming homeless. Even before the pandemic, that is now being greatly exacerbated due to the pandemic. And unless our city puts serious money into not just affordable housing, but low-income housing, then the racial divide will only continue. We are more interested in advancing the vision of what we do want than in fighting to cut back policing. Both go together, but we can't just focus on defunding police without focusing on what it is that we need to invest in. As we stand on the shoulders of the abolitionists against slavery, today what we mean by abolition is that we have to invest in our communities in order to create the vision of the world that we want to live in, that would be more just, loving, and equitable for all, not just fighting against the systems that are harming us. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much, Paula and Communities of Color United. So now I will introduce our moderator. So Chris Harris had intended to be with us tonight, but was having some technical difficulties, so unfortunately will not be able to join. So our moderator for tonight will be Rachel Manning. Rachel Manning is a social worker who works in the criminal legal system and a member of Undoing White Supremacy Austin. She has been a part of USA's campaigns to fund Austin's Communities and Not Policing for several years. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Rachel.
Thank you so much, Bethany, and thank you to Carmen and to Paula and for bringing us that framing this evening. I would like to welcome our candidates this evening. We have folks from District 6, or District 2, District 6, and District 7 who are here this evening to talk with us, and I'm so grateful that y'all have shown up. Just a little bit about our format for this evening. We will start off with a few yes or no questions, and we were going to intend, our original plan was that we had signs that we were going to ask you to hold up. We're gonna just ask you to answer those questions for us. So there will be a couple yes or no questions, which the candidates were given in advance. And then we will have 3 questions at the end that were brought to us from community members, which each candidate will have 90 seconds to address. So thank you so much for all being here. We also will, to begin, we'll have 1 minute opening introductions and statements from the candidates, in which we're asking you to introduce yourself, what race, what position you are running for, and just a brief response to the framing that has been offered by Paula from Communities of Color United. Let's start with Vanessa, Vanessa, who is just popped up on my screen, who's running for District 2. So you have 1 minute.
Wonderful. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa Fuentes, and I'm running for Austin City Council District 2. Thank you all so much for having the grounding ceremony in recognition of Indigenous Peoples Day. I really appreciate the intention in that moment to be here with everyone, and for us to recognize that many lives that were lost in the creation of this country. I'm running for Austin City Council because of the disparities and the deep inequities that exist in our community. COVID has only magnified the fault lines in our community. Austin is the tale of two cities. We're one of the most economically and racially segregated cities in the country. And I'm running to tackle this divide and to bring the community's voice to Austin City Council. I champion equity for working families of District 2. With housing costs and gentrification rapidly accelerating, I want to ensure that Austinites are able to put roots down and that our most tenured Austinites can continue to have a place in the city that we all call home. Thank you for having me today to talk more about the important topics.
Thank you. Next, let's hear from David, who is also running for District 2. Excellent.
Thank you, Rachel. And thank you to everyone for hosting us today and organizing this forum to allow us to share our views and our platforms with folks in the community. As I was listening to some of the presentation and looking at the photos and even looking at the participant list right now, I see so many names and faces of people who have really pushed our community forward and have helped us create real progress at the City of Austin. Thank you as well for that grounding ceremony. I think it's a really important day to reflect on that history in our community. My name is David Chinkanchen. I'm running for Austin City Council in District 2. I was raised in Southeast Austin in a working class immigrant community to a working class immigrant family. And the reason I'm running for office is the same reason I have been in public service since my time as a first generation college student. I'm fighting to do all that I can to better the lives of working families in our community and to help build an Austin where every single person, regardless of where we come from, has the opportunity to pursue their dreams and achieve their potential. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Jimmy Flanagan, who's District 6, running for District 6. Hello, welcome. We have 1 minute.
Hi, Rachel. Glad to be with everybody today. I hope that we're all having an engaged and purpose-filled Indigenous Peoples Day. I know that I am, and have been able to meet some of my constituents even in a COVID social distance mask-wearing block party that I was able to attend today, and it's been refreshing to be able to talk to folks. You know, my tenure on the council over the last 4 years has been one of really moving the needle on social and racial justice. As chair of the Judicial Committee, I worked with my colleagues to lead significant reforms to our municipal court that have been successful in turning back some of those the stats that show racial imbalance in those outcomes. And as chair of the Public Safety Committee, having the trust of my colleagues to lead us through this very challenging and complex reform movement is possibly the biggest honor of my career. It is not something you might have expected from a council member that represents the most suburban and outlying district. But the fact of the matter is, what I enjoy working with you all most is that you are focused on results and outcomes. And that's precisely the type of leadership I bring to the City Council, as evidenced by the lack of any of my opponents showing up to this event tonight, all of whom have not just denied their support for even our modest reforms, but have openly advocated to rolling back even the small progress we've made thus far. So I hope that I can continue to earn your support in my role as chair of the Public Safety Committee and representing District 6.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Morgan Witt, who is running for District 7. Welcome. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So glad to be here this evening. My name is Morgan Witt, and I'm running for City Council in District 7. There was something that Carmen said earlier that really struck me, and I hope informs the direction of our conversation tonight. And it wasn't just grounding to help us acknowledge where we are now and even where we came from, but also the fact that the decisions we make and the conversations we have today impact 7 generations in the future. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running for city council, because as Austin grows and evolves, we see that a lot of communities are getting left behind, and we need to make decisions right now that are going to have a positive impact on those communities today and in the future. COVID has only exacerbated these ongoing problems. We have progressive ideals, but we continue to be economically segregated. We continue to see our Black and Brown communities disparately impacted emotionally, mentally, socioeconomically, and even health-wise. So we have a long way to go, and we need to start coming up with comprehensive solutions that really make systemic change so that we see equity in every aspect of life in Austin, so that everybody can have that Austin experience.
Thank you. And last but not least, Leslie Poole.
Thanks, Rachel, and thank you all for inviting me to this forum. I really appreciate the chance to talk about my record representing District 7 on this council and provide assurances to you on issues that matter to all of us. I especially want to acknowledge the really timely and the very strong grounding and centering that both Carmen and Paula offered us as we convened tonight. And I was proud to be part of the vote that declared Indigenous Peoples Day in ATX, because their time on this land and reverence for this place has historically not been given the respect it so clearly deserves and is owed. I'm also fortunate to know and work with many of you, in particular, on the People's Plan, preserving neighborhoods from gentrification and displacement, and aiding those who have been displaced through an array of programs like Right to Return and the Right to Remain, tenant relocation assistance. And we have so much more work to do on affordable housing. But we have made progress on providing immigrant legal services, decriminalizing low-level drug offenses, loosening the ordinances on camping solicitation, no sit, no lie, and helping those who are experiencing homelessness. We created an equity office. We're reforming the police. So your agenda is making a difference. So thanks for this session tonight. Your leadership and dedication is so needed, and especially at this time.
Thank you, Leslie. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move into some yes or no questions. And so I'm going to hold y'all to a yes or a no on these questions. I'll be reading them out, and then we'll kind of go through the list and get y'all's answers on them. So I'll go ahead and start. So the first one is, in August, after overwhelming public outrage over police brutality and community members calling to defund APD by up to 50%, City Council reallocated a small percentage of the Austin Police Department's outsized budget to EMS mental health response, housing for homeless residents, behavioral health programs, and created the Decouple and Reimagine funds. The Reimagine Public Safety Task Force was created so that community members can guide the intentional creation of non-policing alternatives for public safety. Will you commit to honoring the recommendations and timeline of the Reimagining Force and not to return those funds to the Austin Police Department, even if more time is needed in the reimagining process? Leslie, since you're up, do you want to go first? Will you?
Yes.
Thank you for bringing us on. Morgan.
Also, yes.
Thank you. Excellent. We can only see one of you at a time right now, so we're going to have to go through. Jimmy, are you here?
I created a fancy graphic, yes.
Look at that. That's wonderful. Okay. And then David.
Yes.
Great. And Vanessa. Can we find Vanessa here? Thank you. Okay. Okay, so our next question is, oh, I'm sorry, just one moment. I lost my, okay. Across Austin, increased policing paves the way for gentrification. For example, the Riverside Togetherness Project, launched in April 2019, envisions a crime reduction program led by the police department that would position the neighborhood for revitalization. Just 6 months later, the council approved the domain on Riverside development, clearing the way for the displacement of thousands of low-income Austinites. Will you commit to ending the Riverside Togetherness Project and any similar initiative that furthers the displacement of Black and Brown residents through policing? Now that we have you all, can we see your signs? Thank you.
And Rachel, I wanted to add in on that
No.
project.
No, we're not doing it.
I was one of the votes against
No.
that project.
We're not doing it. Otherwise, we're gonna have to do it on all of them. We've got questions. We've got big questions to come. So, the next 4 questions pertain to aspects of Communities of Color United's Real Solutions platform. The first one being, Austin's Black and Brown and immigrant communities have been hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, and many service sector and domestic workers remain unemployed. Many are ineligible for federal programs and are threatened by eviction. Many of those hardest hit were already struggling to fulfill their basic needs before the pandemic, and this will only intensify once eviction protections are lifted and people face massive accumulated rent payments. Other cities such as Stockton, California, and Jackson, Mississippi are facing this challenge by committing to a monthly guaranteed income for their most impacted residents. Will you commit to extend the direct financial assistance provided by the RISE Fund into a monthly guaranteed income to ensure that residents have access to their basic needs? I'm going to remind you all, just yes or no.
Sounds good.
Thank you. The third question is about the Equity Office. The Equity Office plays a vital role in evaluating the impact of policy proposals on BIPOC, that's Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, and holding all city departments accountable to advancing racial equity. But currently their recommendations are not taken seriously, and other city departments do not proactively use the office to analyze their own policies and practices. Will you commit to honor the recommendations of the Equity Office and work with other city departments to also do so?
Yes.
Thank you. Where did it, Morgan? I'm not sure why our screens are moving around like this, but we're gonna figure it out. Morgan, I see yes. David, there we go. Vanessa, I see yes. Jimmy, I see your graphic, yes. Okay, thank you all. Okay, the fourth question is, Austin Public Health has been underfunded for years as resources were allocated instead to a bloated police department. We have seen the result in the disproportionate rates of illness and death from COVID-19 in Black and Latinx communities, due in part to higher rates of underlying conditions because of the inability to access healthcare. We are all paying the price with a department too small to handle the necessary tasks during the pandemic. Will you commit to scaling up the funding for the Austin Public Health Department by $4.3 million in the next fiscal year to put us back on track for a public health department that is able to protect the health and well-being of all Austinites? Yes. Leslie, do we have an answer from you?
Yeah. Yes, but we're going to need federal help. We won't be able to do it ourselves.
Okay, will you commit to working for that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Jimmy, did we get an answer from you? Okay, great, thank you guys. Oh, the last of the short answer questions is, as housing costs continue to rise, longtime Austin residents continue being displaced as wealthier white residents move into areas such as East Austin, where Black and brown residents created a thriving community despite being uprooted by the 1928 master plan that refused to provide city services for non-white residents living west of I-35. Will you commit to stop displacement by following the recommendations of the People's Plan and preserving existing low-income housing in all of its forms, apartments, single-family homes, multiplexes in the Eastern Crescent, in the midst of pressure to develop new housing and density?
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you all. Okay, now it's gonna be time for y'all to speak. So we're going to, I'd like to introduce a video, a question from David Johnson, who is an organizer with Grassroots Leadership and Texas Advocates for Justice. And we have him, he submitted a video question for us, which we will queue up in just one moment.
As a former racist war on drugs, person in long-term recovery from what the World Health Organization, National Institute of Health, and National Institute on Drug Abuse recognize as public health issues, I have received only pleas, pain, and punishment through my engagement with the criminal legal system, while wealthier and whiter individuals instead consistently received opportunities for wellness and justice outside of incarceration. This is a clear reflection of how policing harms our communities through criminalizing and persecuting us instead of supporting our needs. Will you commit to ending all forms of police involvement in behavioral health crisis responses? And how will you ensure that the voices of directly impacted community members are heard in the development of alternatives so that the reimagined system doesn't have the same punitive impact on individuals and communities?
Rachel, you are muted.
Thank you, thank you. So we're gonna start with District 2 for these questions. I'm gonna ask David to start, and you have 90 seconds to respond to this question.
Thank you. Yeah, to answer the question directly, absolutely. I commit to working to end all police involvement and police violence in behavioral health crisis response. And beyond that, I just want to say that we are in a moment that really calls for urgent action for us to build systems of justice and public safety that really recognize the rights and the humanity of our entire community. This question specifically, this is something that we should all get behind, that we should all take on. This should be one of the easiest changes that we should be able to make, because this is where even law enforcement officials understand that it's not right for police officers to be responding to situations that they are not prepared or trained for. And we need to invest in social workers and community workers that are better prepared to and equipped to connect folks to the care and the treatment that they need as well.
Thank you so much. Vanessa, do you want to go next? You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Yeah, so I also commit to ending all forms of police involvement in behavioral health crisis. For me, reimagining public safety means investing in social workers and mental health experts, and most importantly, listening to the voices of our community, because it's imperative that we prioritize the voices of those who are silenced. On my website, you can see I have a plan for community engagement. I prioritize community involvement, and it's at the base and root of every decision that I will make as our next leader. We cannot keep ignoring the fact that our jails are full of Black and brown people. Brown and Black individuals are more likely to be pulled over, ticketed, and searched. We know that our criminal justice system is still focused on jailing people who are too poor to pay tickets and other charges. So we must demand a more accountable, transparent system. one that prioritizes our shared humanity and treats us with dignity and respect and not criminalizes us because of the color of our skin. And so the last budget cycle, Austin's police budget had risen about $80 million in the last 5 years. It's a 22% increase. I'm glad to see our city take action to meet our community's demand for police reform and for the end of police brutality. The critical work of restorative justice lies ahead, and you can count on me in the ally for this movement, the movement for Black Lives Matter and the movement for racial justice.
Thank you so much. Jimmy will be next. You have 90 seconds.
So having alternative response, non-police response to behavioral health crisis is a key part and one of the big focus areas of the work that we've already begun. And I'm proud that the initial investments that we were able to make in the first round have, at least by Integral Care's own words, investments in 911 and telemedicine and mental health first response are going to let us already reach 90% diversion, where we're currently sending an officer, but we won't have to send an officer. It's really important. And for community engagement, as the first openly gay man to serve on the Austin City Council, I know how important representation is, how important it is to have folks from affected communities serving in places where their voices can be heard. I also chair the Community Advancement Network, which helps coordinate health resources and public safety resources and other community supportive programs across our whole county and region. And we have been taking action to engage more folks from these affected communities to ensure that they're participating in our community council so that the work that is being fed into the systems, which are by design created to exclude folks who are affected by those systems, that we are doing everything we can. And I've been doing that work as chair of the Community Advancement Network and as chair of the Public Safety Committee.
Thank you so much. Leslie Bull?
Thanks. Yes, as Jimmy was saying, that is in fact the very work that is underway. And some of the more tangible changes that I proposed in our fiscal 21 budget deliberations in August and July were diverting mental health emergency calls to trained professionals. That's the new investments in expanding EMS and our contracts with Integral Care. I brought new money, about $6.5 million in new money to house the homeless, and we added more robust funding for victim services. The earlier session where my colleague Greg Kassar was on, he mentioned some specific stories of interactions with the police that had informed the diocese's work to decriminalize minor infractions and misdemeanors. And basically, I think we are all agreed, we need to stop asking our police officers to handle social service needs. And most importantly, we need to hold our officers accountable and responsible for improving community relationships. And it's really important to know that they do not disagree with that. I do believe that they are willing partners in this work, and frankly, we all need to be partnering in this effort. So I'm optimistic about the reimagining conversation and the audit of APD that's underway, and I'm committed to more changes as we proceed, but now we need folks like y'all to stay engaged, and I know you will. We'll be moving into the public review of many functions at APD over the coming weeks and months so that we can find the opportunities for more efficiency and a more equitable vision of community safety, and we can do it with your participation.
Thank you so much. So our next question is from...
I didn't get to answer, Rachel.
Oh shoot, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, Morgan Witt. Yes, thank you for,
No worries.
Have 90 seconds.
Yeah, so to answer the first question, will I commit to ending all forms of police involvement in behavioral health crises? Responses, yes, absolutely. That is an essential component of our overarching need for social reform and investment in both our community and our people. And there are four main ways that I would focus on achieving that and making sure their voices are heard in that process. As we've heard a number of people speak about already, reimagining community engagement is a really important part. We need partnerships, not just with organizations and agencies, but also individuals to make sure that we're getting diverse input. And we need to be more proactive as a city and as a community in making sure we reach out to those who often don't have the loudest voice and are sometimes the hardest to connect with or engage with in the political process. But on top of that, I don't just want to reimagine engagement, I want to reimagine leadership. How are we diversifying and then reforming our hiring and appointment practices so that the people who have firsthand experience with this are the ones helping us make those decisions? I'm not here just to speak on everybody's behalf. I'm here to create true partnership in leadership. We also need to think about training to make sure that those who are responsible for mental health response and health care are able to provide care in an equitable and just way for those who need it, and also connect them to the resources they need depending on, you know, what the context is. But then underlying all of that, we really need to have a data-informed decision-making process so that we can mitigate bias, so that we can measure our progress, and most of all, so that we can promote accountability as we go through this transition.
Thank you, Morgan. Thank you. I will now introduce a video from Miriam, who is a member of ICE Fuera de Austin.
When I'm driving on Riverside and see a police on my rear view mirror, I don't feel safe. I think of how my husband was stopped last winter for his window tint being too dark. Arrested and then was sent to the Pearson Detention Center for 6 months during the peak of COVID-19 and was deported, leaving me to be the sole provider of our 3 children who are all under 10 years old. I drive through Riverside every day to get to my job in a taco truck. What would happen to my children if they stopped me too? The thing that really makes me feel safe is if I could afford to stay at home during this pandemic, feed my family, and have accessible health care. How would you ensure that Austin overspreading on police is redirected into financial resources for all Austinites?
Thank you, Juniper. We're going to start with Jimmy this time. You have 90 seconds to respond to Miriam's question.
I want to thank Miriam for her story. You know, it is another example of the types of work that our officers are doing that they don't need to be doing. Are we really pulling people over because of their window tint? I mean, there are better ways to do the work this community needs done. And we're seeing that in the analysis of 911 data. We're seeing the number of calls that officers are responding to that alternative solutions would be necessary, valuable, possible. And that's work that I am committed to continuing. On the financial support side, one of the things that we've done on the council, certainly in the work that I've done and many of my colleagues, is design these systems that are right now funded primarily through federal dollars in the CARES Act, but design them in a way that we're testing how to best build these systems so that they can be reproduced and expanded when more financial support is available. We're learning a lot of lessons about what systems are working efficiently and which ones need to be tweaked and when the rules have been excluded or when the rules need to be shifted. And that's all going to be really valuable work for when there are more resources in the future and we can get those dollars out into the folks who need it most.
Thank you so much. Morgan, we'll hear from you next. You have 90 seconds.
Yeah, bottom line, we need to be doing what's well documented and proven to work for our community. And what's well documented to work is investing in the services that provide people the support and safety net they need, especially at their most vulnerable during a pandemic or an economic recession. But we need to take our intentions and move forward so that we can ensure maximum impact. We need to make sure that we are effectively implementing our reimagining public safety and our decoupling proposals. We need to do it in a timely way, and we need to make sure that it's done in an accountable way. So that includes clear and ongoing communication with the public, collecting diverse community input, measuring ongoing progress and accountability, and focusing on those real solutions, providing people the relief that they need as they move forward. And then we need to couple that with with broader, more systemic changes, like making sure that housing is more affordable, that transportation is more affordable, and that people have access to a clean environment. So this is really a part of a bigger picture of how do we make Austin more equitable for everybody, livable, and make sure they have access to the resources that they need.
Thank you so much. Leslie?
Well, I want to thank Jennifer for her story, and we are indeed needing to redirect our resources and do it with efficiency and sufficiency. There's still a lot of work to do, but I think the message that she brings has not just been delivered by her and many others, but the message is being acted upon and is being made real. With regard to relief programs in our community, we have set up quite a few programs and directed significant amounts of money for relief into our community. This is, you probably can't see it, but this is from a memo that we got just 2 weeks ago from our Economic Development Department Director with the list table of economic recovery program implementation and the calendar. Thousands of families have been helped, and we have pumped close to $300 million into our community, both from city revenues, but also significant funds that we got from Congress through the CARES Act. And that has been primarily relief to individuals and families. We instituted a moratorium on evictions too, so people can stay in their homes even if they're not able to make their rent payments. We need more help. We need help. The HEROES Act has been stalled out in Congress, which is a deplorable situation, and I hope that that is addressed on November 3. And then next year when the state legislature convenes, I hope to see our state leadership actually be leaders in this arena and send much needed relief revenues to the municipalities throughout the state.
Thank you. David, we'll hear from you next.
Thank you so much. Well, I also want to thank you all for sharing that story with us. I think those are exactly the kinds of stories and experiences that need to be forged into the structure of the new systems that we are hoping to build. Coming from an immigrant family, having had undocumented family members and friends, I understand that fear in a very personal way. And so we absolutely need change. And, like y'all said in the beginning, it's not just about reallocating funds, but making sure that our investments, that our policies and our laws reflect our community values and actually serve those values that our community has espoused. And, in this previous budget, I supported the reallocation of funds for low barrier programs that promote wellness in our community, that improve safety, that reduce harm, and that prevent violence. And I think that is the approach that we need to take. And I absolutely believe that those funds that are freed up should be used for direct financial assistance, especially for those communities that have been disproportionately impacted, like ours in Southeast Austin, and the communities of color in the rest of town.
Thank you. And Vanessa, thank you. You have 90 seconds.
Thank you all. Yeah, I'm committed to doing the tough work of reimagining how we do public safety. As a Latina, as a daughter of immigrants, and as someone who comes from a mixed status family, I know that there's not a day where my family doesn't worry about receiving a call from one of our family members that someone in our family has been detained by ICE. And that's the reality that many families in our community faces. And for me, first, it starts by educating and informing our community that we spend more on police than other big cities. And then we look at reimagining how we do public safety. We must invest to getting to the root causes of crime and poverty and look at what helps Austinites feel safe. Because I shared earlier, many Austinites in my community don't feel safe because of the color of our skin. The majority of officer-involved shootings happen in District 2, which is a community that is 72% Latino. What kind of a message does that send? Does that make our communities feel safe? When we talk about safety, we need to reach consensus on what exactly does safety mean, because we're not all on the same playing field. I believe that our budget is a moral document and that we should question it. And at a time when my community is feeling the horrific impact of COVID, we need more direct financial assistance. The governor right now is sitting on $5 to $6 billion that have not been allocated to cities and towns throughout the state. And that's a primary resource that we can use to inject much needed financial assistance to our families. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you for being very on time with these. I appreciate that. Our last question I will read. It'll be the same format for y'all, but I'm going to read the question. It's our final short answer question, which is, the Austin Police Department was created in 1865 to control newly freed Black people who were, quote unquote, congregating in and around Austin in freedmen's towns. The early history of Austin includes the Austin City Council and the Austin Police Department working together hand in hand to displace those formerly vibrant communities through zoning and through policing. Today, Black Austinites continue to be displaced at an alarming rate. The Austin Police Department has come under fire for continuing in its legacy of police brutality and arresting for addiction and mental health issues. City Council has continued to greenlight zoning changes that make way for high-cost developments that threaten the existence of Black and brown neighborhoods, such as Riverside and Montopolis. In a UT Austin study about why African Americans left Austin, one participant put it this way: they didn't want to redo East Austin when we were living in it. We saw what was happening to Austin. They were trying to get all the property in Austin they could. The city was taking land, jacking up prices. The gentrification started setting in. Residents are sick to their stomachs seeing what they see. If elected, how will you commit to exit this alliance with the police for the displacement of Black Austinites, and how will you invest in their right to return? Vanessa, we'll start with you. 90 seconds.
The displacement of our Black community has been an ongoing issue here in Austin. I'm the only candidate in this race that has a plan on how to tackle our displacement crisis, and that includes expanding the right to stay and right to return policy. I believe step one, we need to preserve existing affordable housing. Step two, we need to get more affordable housing aimed at 60% MFI and below, especially in areas without sufficient affordable housing or housing types. Additionally, we need to double our investment in anti-displacement programs and helping Austinites stay in their home. Our greatest asset is our people, and we should prioritize the people in all the decisions that we do. We also need to significantly invest in programs that help Austinites with repairing their homes and also secure additional land trusts. Those are some of the policies that I champion and that I have on my website. I believe that Austin can be a leader in anti-displacement and that our policies and our budget should reflect our values. Thank you.
Thank you. David, you have 90 seconds to respond.
Thank you. First, to get at the aspect of public safety behind this, I think that, like I said earlier, this moment in our community is calling for urgent action. And in order to make the kind of changes that this movement for justice and for Black lives demands and calls for, we need to build public trust. And in order to build that public trust, we need to have real measures and mechanisms for accountability. And in order to have real accountability, we need to make sure that the voices of our communities of color and the communities that are most impacted by the criminal justice system and by these issues have a seat at the table, that their voices are front and center. I have been working diligently on anti-displacement measures for the past several years, including supporting the policies for right to return and right to remain, including supporting funding for tenant advocacy, including creating the single largest affordable housing bond proposal that has ever been approved by voters in Austin. The displacement of our Black and Brown communities and our communities of color is not just an issue, it is the issue that we are grappling with in Austin. And I hope to continue that work in an even more impactful way. And like I said in my introduction, this is the center and the focus of our campaign, is to build that Austin where every single family has the opportunity to pursue their dreams and achieve their potential. And in order to do that, we need stable housing, we need good jobs with worker protections. We need our city to invest in our communities in a way that truly reflects our values.
Thank you very much. Jimmy, will you go next? You have 90 seconds.
So I have worked very hard and have taken very hard votes to ensure that where we're building new housing is not limited to East Austin. I have taken hard votes to ensure that new housing is built out in my district as well. I have also voted against zoning cases that have limited affordable housing, that have limited unnecessarily the ability to get more income restricted units. And I think we have to acknowledge at least one difficult truth, which is that displacement happens even without a zoning case, because the market is such that when there's supply and demand at play, value properties get valuable, not because the council set the values, but because that's how the market works. And in order to change how the market works, you have to work at the state and federal level. At the city level, I have fought hard to include affordable housing. I have fought and I have agreed and supported all of the right to return and right to stay initiatives that have come only because we have fought to do zoning and build affordable housing in ways that can allow us to have those policies and comply with state law. And the danger we always face in Austin is that the state will come in and preempt our ability to do these things. And it doesn't mean that every vote is an easy one. It doesn't mean that every vote is the one we want, but I have been 100% consistent. And I certainly have never taken a vote that restricted housing in my district while we built housing in East Austin.
Thank you so much. Morgan, will you share with us? You have 90 seconds to respond.
Yeah, you know, as Austin's population continues to explode, we've seen over the last decade that the Black community has shrunk by about 2%. And so as we call for systemic change and equity, we see ourselves continuing to go down the wrong path, and we have to make serious systemic change in order to overcome that. So we can absolutely work to exit the alliance with policing to prevent displacement in that regard by decriminalizing minor offenses, putting an end to these community policing initiatives, and as we talked about, decoupling things like mental health response and even traffic enforcement from the police department. We can also bolster our anti-displacement programs and funding, as we've talked about. That's going to include rent subsidies, right to return and remain funding, but also land trusts and bolstering those renter advocacy programs. And on top of that, in a much more, from a broader perspective, we need to think about how we are as a city are planning in general, and even going into the input processes and making sure that those are equitable. If you look at the 2012 Imagine Austin plan, it didn't get developed with diverse enough community input. It lacks a lot of development on the west side. The west side has to take its fair share of housing development. Otherwise, we're not going to mitigate these issues of gentrification. So we really need to take a look at a broader picture of this, not just with reimagining public safety, but implementing it at all levels.
Thank you very much. And Leslie, will you wrap us up? You have 90 seconds.
Sure. I support keeping neighborhoods intact, like the East Riverside community. I was one of the 3 council members who voted against that zoning change. And I've worked diligently with neighborhoods over the last 6 years. I've been on the dais on zoning cases that affect them to ensure that they're not priced out of their communities. Preserving neighborhoods has been a key goal of mine, and I've tried to advance elements of the People's Plan, including the right to remain and the right to return. I commissioned the Uprooted study that UT wrote for us that created a mechanism for planners to recognize and measure displacement and gentrification so we can see the impacts our decisions on zoning or redevelopment have on neighborhoods that we should be trying to save. We have a chance with a 5-acre site in Crestview on the Red Line to build affordable housing and some live workspace and have a park, more than an acre of a park, which will meet the transit-oriented development ideal that the city has long sought. But the biggest thing we can do for affordable housing is to overturn the ban on inclusionary zoning. I asked State Representative Gina Hinojosa to file the bill to engage that fight in the 86th legislative session last year. It's on council's legislative agenda for the legislative session next year. And frankly, without inclusionary zoning, we won't be able to have affordable housing on the west side of town because it's just too darn expensive to build over there. And the only way we can do that is by requiring developers to include affordable units wherever it is that they are building and redeveloping. We've got that. I can't be any more forceful on that point. That's the only way we're going to be able to redevelop on the west side.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, to provide affordable housing in redevelopment on the west side. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all for your really thoughtful answers. I appreciate we all appreciate your being here. We have at this point just closing statements from everyone. We're gonna flip the order a little bit and try and keep things equitable. But here's the final question for y'all that we'd like you to reflect on in your closings. We'd like you to talk about your experience taking on issues of institutional racism. Why should voters who care about racial equity trust you to put their well-being ahead of institutions like the Police Association and developers who want to continue the status quo of violent policing, poverty, and displacement of Black, Indigenous, and people of color residents of Austin? We're going to start with Morgan tonight, and you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying quickly that I'm not a politician. So I come to this race because I'm an educator and a community advocate, and I've committed my career and my life to serving people, specifically those individuals and communities that are most marginalized and underrepresented. So I'm not in the pocket of these big organizations that have ulterior motives. We talk about the school to prison pipeline a lot, and the reality is that education is where injustice starts. And I've worked at every level in the classroom, as in an administrative capacity, as a program director, in making sure not only that those marginalized people were connected with the resources they needed and empowered with the skills so that they could go live better lives for themselves and their families. But I was also committed to and responsible for making sure that our own programs were equitably implemented so that everybody could have access. So that's why I'm here. I am not here because I want the status. I'm here because leadership especially at the local level, is about public service, and I'm here to represent, but I'm also here to amplify and provide people the opportunity to take leadership in this conversation and help guide us through this so that we don't continue to have other people making decisions on our behalf.
Thank you so much, Morgan. Leslie, you'll be next. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks. I just want to thank you all once again for all of the work that you do for so many in our community. It's hard work, especially these days, but the fact that we figured out how to campaign and also to educate the community with forums like this during a pandemic, and how to keep doing the work to move our city forward, and the fact of your resilience, your connection to the land, and the knowledge you bring to your advocacy, that just is a real cause for optimism. I'm humbled to be part of the work that we do together and to partner with you as we show other cities how to lead on improving the quality of life, especially for those who are vulnerable or disproportionately affected by the economy. Outside pressure, inside advocacy, I heard someone say earlier, makes a difference. And there's so much that we've done on this 10-1 Council toward transformational change. And there's more work to do, but we have certainly laid the predicate for vast transformational change ahead of us. And in closing, I just want to say a happy Indigenous Peoples Day. I think it's really great that we have this holiday. So thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you. Jimmy, you'll be next. You have 2 minutes to close.
Thank you. Well, like I said in my opening statement, my opponents are not here tonight. And that really means something. They have all taken very strong positions against change in the police department. They've taken strong positions against change in how we address homelessness. They have taken strong positions against all of the issues and the challenges that we face in terms of addressing institutional racism. My work on the council has proven that I can do the work, not just in the last 6 months. I led on reforming the police contract. I led the Judicial Committee in reforming our municipal court. I'm leading the Public Safety Committee now on our police issues. This is work that is really challenging, but something that I heard that really spoke to me during the protests after Mike Ramos and George Floyd was a call to action that said, this is not people of color's problem. This is not black people's problem. This is a white people problem. And white people got to be willing to fix it. And you got to talk to other white people. And I've taken that to heart. And I have done the work. And I do the work not just on the council, but at a regional level. In my district, it's half Williamson County, half Travis County. And the council has trusted me to represent the city at CapCog, which is a 10-county regional council of governments. I'm one of the city appointees to Campo, which is a 5-county board that manages transportation. And I bring that voice to all of those issues in a way that has moved the needle. And we're starting to see change in our regional communities as well. And credit to Judge Poppy in Bastrop County for listening to his community, and someone who I've come to appreciate and is now removing their Confederate monument from their courthouse. And I hope that Judge Gravel in Williamson County takes similar strong action, because this work is challenging, but it is not impossible. And I hope that you all really talk to your friends and neighbors about this election. It's challenging to campaign in a pandemic, and the word of mouth really matters. And I hope that I have earned your continued support for a second term.
Thank you so much. David, you'll be next. You have 2 minutes to close.
Thank you. First, I just want to say, I apologize if I haven't been as articulate in speaking to these issues as I have been in the past in other forums, but listening to the stories that have been shared is something that makes me really emotional and, really hits me to my core, because these fights, these are the reasons that I became involved in public service, that I began organizing, the reason I have dedicated my life to this work. And so thank you again for organizing this forum. Thank you for allowing us to learn from y'all and to hear these stories. In closing, I just want to say this, you know, these injustices, these inequalities that we see in the criminal justice system and in the immigration detention system are starkest there. But the reality is that systemic racism is prevalent and pervades every single aspect of our society, including education and housing and employment and so much more. And so that is the work that we are taking on. And I am confident in my belief that drove the launch of this campaign, which is that when ordinary people like us come together, when we set aside the small differences and join together in common purpose and solidarity, we can accomplish extraordinary things. Like someone said earlier, I believe a better world is possible, and that we can build systems of justice that truly recognize the rights, the dignity, and the humanity of all people. That is the work that I have been dedicated to. You can trust that I will continue that work because I've been doing it for years alongside many of you. And so I just want to say thank you again for allowing us the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to continuing to fight alongside you.
Thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, Vanessa, you have 2 minutes to close.
Thank you all. Thank you for hosting this important conversation. You know, as we look to create systemic change, it is clear that we need fresh voices, proven community leaders with a track record of working outside the system to affect change. We are at a place right now where we get to decide what we want our politics and our policies to look like. And it's really important that we have as many voices from the community as possible participating. More fresh voices for our community and less for City Hall interests. I believe that every Austinite, regardless of race, should be able to move safely around our city, that a roof over your head should be a given, that healthy food access is a priority. And I believe that healthcare is a right, not a privilege, and that most importantly, every Austinite should have the opportunity to create the life that they want to live. However, for many in my community, that's not the reality. We are in a time of racial reckoning, and it is crucial that we come together to recognize and name this problem as institutional racism, because only then can we begin the important work of correcting our wrongdoings and securing rights for our most vulnerable populations. I'm running to bring our community's voice to City Hall. My community is resilient from surviving the historic and deadly floods of 2013 and 2015 and now this pandemic. I believe that we need a leader who will ask the tough questions, defend our community from displacement, and stand up for our community on the issues that matter most. A vote for me is a vote for systemic change. I'm committed to fighting for the people of District 2 and to guarantee that every resident has a fair shot at a healthy, prosperous life. Please visit my website, vanessaforoustin.com, to learn more on how I plan to put District 2 first. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of the candidates for coming tonight. That wraps up this forum. Thank you to all of the support from grassroots leadership, from Carmen, who opened us up twice with beautiful and really, really wonderful acknowledgments of Indigenous Peoples Day. And thank you to CCU for helping us frame this, not just today in this forum, but for the last 5 years. Thank you to also members of, so grassroots leadership, to everyone from Undoing White Supremacy Austin who helped put this together, and to all of the candidates for showing up tonight. Thank you so much, and that will conclude our evening. Have a good night, and be well, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Nice job, Rachel.
Thank you.